Since its founding in the 30th millennium, the Imperium of Man has spanned the entire galaxy for dozens of centuries. To operate this pan-galactic empire despite the constant interference of the warp, the central government on Terra is forced to delegate significant political authority to local planetary governors. Even so, the Adeptus Administratum, the primary administrative arm on Terra, must maintain a workforce of over 10 billion personnel at all times to keep this massive regime functioning. Within thousands of subdepartments, these officials work day and night to compile data for the Council of High Lords, managing everything from population estimates and planetary tithes to civil logistics and the construction budgets of war fleets. It is this endless cycle of recording and filing that keeps the Imperium's gears of flesh moving. Some clerks spend their entire lives seated at logic pews, performing monotonous tasks whose ultimate purpose they never truly understand. Despite the Administratum operating at full capacity, the sheer volume of information flooding in from across the galaxy makes their efficiency appear abysmal. With enemies of humanity lurking among the stars, the entire Imperium faces constant xenos and chaos threats. Every day, the government receives a deluge of distress signals from various sectors. Because of the unpredictable nature of warp storms, these messages can take months or years to reach Terra, only to be buried under mountains of paperwork for decades more. Only the most urgent reports, those posing an existential threat to the Imperium, command the immediate attention of the High Lords. Furthermore, because organizing a reaction force of the Imperial Navy and Astro Militarum takes immense time, fringe worlds with little strategic value are often left to fend for themselves. These worlds must raise their own planetary defense forces and form mutual protection pacts with neighboring systems. While the Administratum's staggering inefficiency is a constant burden, the Imperium would grind to a halt without the slow turning of its bureaucratic wheels, granting the Master of the Administratum immense influence within the High Lords' Council. In the centuries following the War of the Beast and the end of Draken Vangarich's reign, the Ecclesiarchy experienced a massive resurgence. By the 34th millennium, its influence had seeped into every corner of the Imperium.
Through its constant work, the Ecclesiarchy successfully positioned itself as the sole voice of the Emperor. Believers came to accept every word of the Ecclesiarch as a divine decree, a political image that allowed the Church to manipulate council decisions, legal revisions, and the allocation of resources, nearly always in its own favor. This dominance inevitably drew the ire of the Administratum. Enraged by their loss of power, the Administratum began taking countermeasures, forming alliances with the Adeptus Mechanicus and certain Space Marine chapters. From the 34th to the 35th millennium, the Ecclesiarchy's power began to wane under this multi-front pressure, and the Administratum once again seized the primary voice in the Council. This cycle of power and restraint was the very essence of the High Lord system. However, this balance was shattered once more around the 2nd century of the 35th millennium. To escape the friction on Terra, the Ecclesiarchy moved its headquarters to EP27 in the Segmentum Tempestus. This world, an ancient battlefield from the Great Crusade, became a cardinal world strictly controlled by the Church, filled with massive cathedrals and accumulating staggering wealth. This wealth was a primary reason why Ecclesiarch Benedict IV chose to relocate. Ophelia 7 provided a sanctuary where the Church could flourish away from the Administratum shadow. They used inflammatory sermons to raise vast sums from fanatical believers, funneling resources into a monument race across the galaxy. Soon, the Ecclesiarchy raised its own private military, the Frateris Templar, possessing a hybrid fleet used to violently suppress any heretics who opposed them. After 300 years of growth on Ophelia 7, Ecclesiarch Gregorius XI moved the Church back to Terra, a project that nearly exhausted the Church's resources. Shortly after returning in the mid-35th millennium, Gregorius XI died mysteriously of food poisoning. Struggles with the Administratum resumed as the elite grew more decadent. During this era, another massive warp storm emerged, cutting off many sectors. Chaos and Xenos threats surged, and in the deep hive minds, strange new cults began to spread. Members of these cults shared telepathic bonds and underwent physical mutations, losing hair and eventually growing multiple limbs with razor-sharp claws. These gene-stealer cults spread as the Ecclesiarchy's grip on its parishes peacefully.
This era of madness led to the rise of Goge Vandire, a shrewd and paranoid tyrant who seized control of both the Administratum and the Ecclesiarchy. His reign of blood claimed billions of lives before the Emperor's silent intervention and the receding warp storms brought his villainy to an end. As the 40th millennium dawned, new prophecies of doom arose. Psychers saw visions of the Great Devourer, and it was said that statues of the Emperor across the galaxy were weeping blood. During this dark time, Abaddon the Despoiler received a secret from the prophetess Moriana regarding the Blackstone Fortresses.
Discovered in the 33rd millennium in the Gothic sector, these 6 massive alien constructs, known to the Eldar as the Talismans of Vaul, were ancient warp weapons capable of obliterating entire star systems. Moriana, an original founder of the Inquisition who had turned to chaos, guided Abaddon toward 2 artifacts needed to awaken these weapons, the Hand of Darkness and the Eye of Night. In 1422.M41, a massive warp storm heralded the arrival of the Black Legion. The 12th Black Crusade, also known as the Gothic War, had begun. Abaddon sought to seize these ancient weapons to shatter the stalemate of the Long War and bring the Imperium to its knees.